That was some kind of ass kicking the Royals took tonight, so let's talk about it all in this edition of Locked On Royals.
You are Locked On Royals, your daily Kansas City Royals podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Win or lose, thank you for tuning in to another edition of Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. As always, I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15, or you can find us on wherever you get your podcast. That can be Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, Google Podcast, Odyssey, and YouTube. Just be sure to hit that follow button and subscribe. If you want to know a little bit more about me and this show, especially for the first-time listeners, well, I am based here in Kansas City. I work at Sports Radio 810. WHB, doing some hosting, co-hosting, and a little bit of producing from the day-to-day in the sports world. But when it comes to this podcast, when you click on this link, you know that you're going to be getting 30 straight minutes of Royals baseball. Now, today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more as the playoffs have completely wound down in the winter sports aspect, but also getting closer and closer on the baseball side of things. The sports have stopped sporting like we wanted them to, but this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Well, if you follow me on Twitter, you would know that for most games, I would put out anywhere from 15 to 20 tweets. You know, I try to stay pretty busy, really talk through it, watching this game, interact with other people. Tonight, I was almost radio silent. I think I had more than 2 or 3 tweets tonight, and I don't think there was much to say. I don't think there was anything I could have added tonight that would have made you, the fan, or the listener feel better. And that's kind of the approach I took, because tonight was unbearable. Tonight was awful. From start to finish, that game was awful. And I would say performance-wise, production-wise, that was the worst game the Royals had all year. I think in terms from start to finish, offense, defense, decisions, everything about it. Focus, whatever you want to say. It's the worst game they had all year. Not the most gut-wrenching, right? I've given you gut-wrenching games before. You know, when they blew that game against Milwaukee, when there was 2 outs and nobody on, and Willy Adames had the go-ahead 3-run home run. That, to me, stands alone because I was at that game. The game in which they blew a 5-0 lead to Cleveland, that one stung, right? That one really, really hurt. When they blew that game in extra innings to the Mariners after MJ Melendez had tied it coming off the bench earlier in that game. Those games stung, right? Tonight wasn't about stinging. It more so was just ugly to watch. And, I get there's going to be comments out there, which is mainly why I stayed away tonight on social media. I'm done talking people off the ledge. I don't feel it's my place to do so. We'll talk about this a little bit more in segment number 2 about staying positive and, what you should do, what you shouldn't do. Look, it's not my place. As I've said multiple times before, I'm not the gatekeeper of this fan base. Act however the hell you want to act with this team. I do think there are glaring holes with this team. We've known that, though. It's game 120 tonight. They just wrapped up game 120. There's 42 games to go. We know what they do well. We know what they don't do well. And yeah, some of their things they've done well this season have not been great in a crucial series against the Minnesota Twins. But as they gear up for game 3, and I say gear up because they play at noon tomorrow. So we're talking about a 15-hour turnaround. In fact, a less than 15-hour turnaround. And they'll have to get to the ballpark early. So we're probably talking more a 12-hour turnaround for this team. They'll have their ace on the bump in Cole Ragans. But tomorrow's the last game they'll play at Target Field this year. The Twins will come to Kansas City, and that'll be games 11, 12, and 13 against the Twins this year. So it's good to leave Target Field. The Royals have been abysmal there since 2017. Good buddy Braden Turner put this out on Twitter. 20 games below 500. 17 and 37 since 2017. It's been awful. It feels like every time they've gone there, and yes, part of that is there were some awful Royals teams mixed in there. They never win there, though. It's a bad matchup for them. And tonight, I think what was so sickening about it is you had the matchup you wanted. We talked about that in yesterday's episode. Seth Lugo on the bump against a rookie making his debut. And Seth Lugo, though he had not been that great in the second half, and we'll get into that inning workload in our final segment tonight. But he just never looked good. That was the worst we saw Seth Lugo look by miles this year. It wasn't close. From the first batter he faced in Willie Castro to the last one he faced, which I want to say it was right before Manuel Margot, if I'm not mistaken. So I want to say like Max Kepler or someone was his last batter he faced. Point doesn't really matter there. From start to finish, he was awful. And I think he would tell you that he was bad tonight. And I don't think he's going to chalk it up to feeling exhausted or, he feels like he's thrown too many innings this year. I don't think it's that at all. He just wasn't good, plain and simple. And offensively, the Royals didn't jump on a rookie pitcher like they should have. There were some passive at-bats up there. And that's going to frustrate you. But overall, this was just an ass-kicking at its finest. I mean, nothing else to say other than the Royals got pummeled in this game. And I'm just going to chalk it up at this point as the Twins are an awful matchup for them. They can't beat the Minnesota Twins. Even if they find a way to win tomorrow, they can't beat Minnesota. They will have lost 3 of 3 series with 1 more to go this year. And in a handful of those games, it hasn't been close, especially at Target Field. Twins get out early, Royals are scrambling, starters don't look good. Nothing about it makes you feel good. But I will say this. We have gone through this somewhat of a roller coaster. I don't even want to call it a roller coaster because it's not like the Royals started horribly, were really good, then were really bad. Nothing like that. The Royals, for the most part this year, have remained pretty consistent. They haven't lost more than 4 games in a row this year. They've been swept once. So the treacherous stretch of play hasn't happened yet that we know of. That's why I titled this first segment of Doesn't Get Worse Than That, I Think. Because Buddy Bell, former Royals manager, said, never say it can't get worse. And that's the same approach I'm going to have here. Right? The Royals had to find a way to bounce back either tomorrow, and if they get swept tomorrow, you can't let that carry with you to Cincinnati. Right? There is a limited amount of games left. And right, if you're done with this team, then I would say be done. Right? And again, that'll bleed into segment number 2 here. But if you don't think they're good, if you're done watching this team, be done. Right? I think that's my approach with it at this point. If you're in with this team, you're in with this team. As I said, I'm not going to tell you how to behave, how to be positive, how to be negative. I'm saying for the own of the feeling toward the team, your health watching this baseball team. If you're done, if you are sick watching this team, take a break, take a breather of not watching them. If you feel like they're about to turn a corner, feel optimistic about it. Take whatever approach that you want here. But for me, I look at these final 42 games, and I feel like I can have that grasp of we're going to have some high moments. We're going to have some feel-good moments. There's a really good chance there's going to be a game like this again, or a game like Monday night. And I think it always stands out a little bit more when it's a division rival. It's a big series like this. Felt the same way about that Boston series. In fact, go 1 week ago, 7 days ago, we did a podcast. It was a little bit doom and gloom. They lost back-to-back games to Boston. Wild card lead was down to a half a game. The Royals were 1 loss away from relinquishing a playoff spot. Tomorrow, they will be one of the first teams to play, and they could, maybe at the end of the day, have a 2-game lead in the wild card and have a game gained on Minnesota. So you could still feel pretty good, but I also understand it can be short-lived, right? And baseball is a really, really difficult sport to stay positive for 162. I'm no saint either. I'm no perfect fan or perfect podcaster. Believe me, there's been times this year that even I have thought to myself, is this it? Is this the tailspin? Right? And we can go all the way back to April or May when there were those moments in your head. For me, there was no moment this year that compares to that Rangers series. Mainly because I was down there in person. The fact they had gotten swept, they had lost a playoff spot. There was still plenty of baseball left to go. But it was that dreaded feeling of, man, there's a lot of baseball left, and they've lost a huge lead that they once had in the wild card race. this could be it. Then they rebounded. Tonight feels like last Tuesday to me, if I'm being quite honest with you, because Boston was a team right there with them. Minnesota's a team right there with them. And Boston and Minnesota took the first 2 games of the series, which has led us to a Wednesday game in which Cole Ragans will start. But it's all about this team's mentality, their psyche after getting their ass kicked like tonight. We'll have to see. But again, in these final 42 games, my biggest piece of advice, take it if you want, don't. I don't care, truthfully. But with these 42 games, it's going to be a roller coaster. As I said, the first 120 have been. Not really. I think these 42 games are going to be a roller coaster. They're going to see Minnesota again. They're going to see Cleveland. They're going to see the Yankees. They're going to see the Astros. There's going to be, hopefully, high points in those series. But there's also going to be nights that you feel like this is the end. Although with 42 games to go, I don't know if I see a collapse. I could see them losing a playoff spot, but I don't think they're going to fall completely out of it. Maybe some of you tonight listening, watching, again, thank you for listening and watching, whether it's a win or a lose. But if you feel that way, definitely let us know in the YouTube comments. I'm never going to be upset at pushback or anybody disagrees with me. It's a part of why I love doing this. But I don't see it being a collapse in which they can fall out of playoff contention before September. I think because of how Seattle looks, how Boston looks, because of their schedules, it's going to come down to that final week. I said it last night. I'll say it again. And tonight doesn't change that for me. But still, inexcusable, like last night, to get whooped up on by a team like Minnesota. As good as they are, you were supposed to come in and compete. And the same way you're supposed to compete with Boston, haven't gotten it done in Game 1 and Game 2. Only one more opportunity at Target Field this year. Tomorrow, first pitch at 12:10. Cole Ragans will climb the bump, and he will duel with Bailey Ober, a guy that the Royals have tagged the 2 times they've seen him this year. Okay, we're going to take our first break of the show. When we come back, let's take a moment as fans to simply understand the fact that baseball is a really hard sport to remain even with all season long. I'm going to tell you why next on Locked On Royals. You are tuning to Locked On Royals in the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson. You can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. Want to give a shout out to 2 sponsors, starting with Ibotta. Are you taking that dream vacation this summer but dreading the cost? With Ibotta, you get cash back on all of your purchases, so you can spend more time making memories this summer and less time dreaming about them. Ibotta is a free app that lets you earn cash back every time you shop. Earn hundreds of items from groceries to beauty supplies, even toys, so you can make sure you're beating inflation no matter what you are purchasing. The average Ibotta user earns $256 per year. That could cover the cost of an entire shopping trip, that flight you've been eyeing, or that fancy dinner that you've been craving. Right now, Ibotta is offering our listeners $5 just for trying Ibotta by using code LOCKEDONMLB when you register. Just go to the App Store or the Google Play Store and download the free Ibotta app to start earning cash back and use code LOCKEDONMLB. That's IBOTTA in the Google Play or the App Store and use code LOCKEDONMLB. Also want to let you know about FanDuel. This summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most of your summer. FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Maybe right now you're not feeling too optimistic about the Royals, and maybe you want to spin your negativity into winning some money. Maybe you want to bet on them to lose tomorrow because of how they fared at Target Field, how they fared against Minnesota this year. Hey, I'm not going to push back. That could be winning some money tomorrow. But if you're a believer in Cole Ragans, maybe take the over on his strikeout total tomorrow on FanDuel. Again, just see how you feel when you wake up in the morning. Maybe you're feeling hopeful. Maybe you're feeling negative. But just head over to FanDuel and start winning some money today and get some money in your account before football season starts. I know it's one of my wheelhouses. Can't wait for college football and the NFL, and I'm going to be spending my time winning some money over at FanDuel. Well, I thought this would be a good segment to do just to kind of bridge that gap between recapping what happened tonight and maybe looking a little bit ahead toward the future. And I think if you followed me long enough, maybe you like the show, maybe you don't. I know it's not going to have a perfect reputation. Not everybody's going to love what I have to say. Not everybody's going to agree with what I have to say. And I think over the course of this season, what I can tell you, even with 42 games to go, there are nights that I would say I am fatigued with with doing a lot of this stuff, doing a podcast, interacting, answering questions. And I feel like that's natural. When there's a game played every single night, you have a lot of stuff that you have to come up with. And then not all of it is going to be sunshine and rainbows. When this team's playing well, I would do 3 podcasts a day because there's so much to cover. On nights like tonight, when it's all negative, it's hard to, have that enthusiasm. Hopefully you still enjoy this podcast episode. I'm not trying to bring down the energy or the vibes of this episode, but we all know tonight you're not feeling the best about the way the Royals performed. But what I have come to decide in my own way, that baseball is just an impossible sport to stay hopeful and optimistic for 162. And, I can always see in comments, fans go back and forth. And I think early on in the year, when I was taking a positive approach, I wanted to kind of have the gotcha moment of, you argue back with a fan that just says, oh, this team sucks. I'm done watching them. They're terrible. This guy's terrible. And I had this need of, well, no, you're not correct on that. But you'd revisit that same conversation every single month. And even tonight, a large chunk of people that follow me said, this is it. Team is done. Right? They're not making the playoffs this year. They may be 500 when it's all said and done. Right? There's that initial feeling, the emotion that comes out. And like I said, as a fan, I've done it before. I've done it before when you have that initial reaction, because in the moment it stings. After it's done, you have like a 30-minute hour window where it simmers down. You go, okay, maybe it's not as bad as I thought, and I'm going to watch them tomorrow. And that's the way I kind of took this, as, every loss isn't as bad as you think it is, and every win is never as good as you think it is. And that's the challenge of having this even playing field and watching baseball. Right? In football, whether you're a diehard Chiefs fan, you're a diehard KU, K-State, Missouri fan, whatever your fandom is in football, play once a week. So if they win, you can ride that into the next week. They lose, you got to sit on that loss for a long time. Basketball, they play every 3 to 4 to 5 days. I watch a lot of basketball, and it varies, right? They can have a quick turnaround, like a 2-day turnaround. College basketball, you'll play on a Saturday and have big Monday, right? In the NBA, there can be a day turnaround. You can play on a Monday and play on a Wednesday, right? So basketball still, you have maybe an easier time than football to be able to wash away a bad loss. Like the Royals play in now almost 13. What would that be? I think about 14 hours, maybe 14 hours and 20 minutes is when they will have their first pitch against the Twins. So to me, I look at that as another opportunity to make you forget about tonight. And that's kind of been the challenge back and forth. And I've joked with a couple of people before of, the Royals have given us the blessing this year of living and dying night to night. That when they win, it changes your mood. You feel really good. They lose like they did tonight, it can impact your mood in such a bad way. And that's just baseball, right? If they win tomorrow, you'll forget about what happened tonight. They lose and they have an off day on Thursday, you're not going to feel good for 2 days. But by the time the game rolls around on Friday, you're back in front of the TV, you're back at the bar, you're on your couch, you're watching this game, and you're hopeful again. And that's been this challenge and the struggle with baseball. And I also think what factors in is that the Royals have been bad for nearly a decade at this point. They haven't had a winning season since they won the World Series in 2015. We're talking nearly a decade since they were in a spot like this again. And I think part of that is just, last year it didn't matter that they would lose to Minnesota 13-3 in August. It didn't. In 2018, it didn't matter. 2019, it didn't matter. 2022, it didn't matter. 2017, it did, because they were still fighting for a wild card spot. And I remember they got smoked at Target Field not long after they started their skid. I think gave up like 9 or 10 runs in the first inning. I think it was like Onelki Garcia made a spot start for the Royals, and it was awful, right? It kind of felt like tonight where just things never went their way. But this sense that I've gotten, and I'm curious of people's thoughts on how you handle a baseball season, like NFL season, college football season. You win, I feel good for the next 3 to 4 days. You lose, that sucks. You have to sit on that for a long time. But in baseball, there's such a quick turnaround, right? And you can put things into perspective and say, the Royals are 65-55. They have a playoff spot. They're still only 6 games back in the Central. It's not like the season ended tonight. To some, it may feel that way. But I'll go back to something I said in the opening segment. And maybe it was a bit hypocritical because I said I'm not going to be a gatekeeper, but then said what you need to do if you've said these things. I don't truly believe that. I think I would push back a little bit myself on it. But for some fans that, have the feeling of they're done, they're not a playoff team, I'm tired of watching them, well, then you don't have to watch them. I'm not going to ask you to watch this team. I'd hope you watch this podcast and still get your Royals news from me. But if you remain optimistic and you don't give up on them and they end up making it, I think it makes it all that much sweeter. But again, I don't blame any fans for feeling overly negative tonight or because of this stretch. You feel negative. I saw a stat that they are 5 or 6 games below 500 since Memorial Day. They're 53-54 against teams that are not named the White Sox. Those are all things that we've discussed before and we have factored in. But I also think my overarching headliner that I'll put in big, bright lights is that, this team was never going to go from 106 losses to being one of the dominant teams in the American League. There was going to be growing pains. There were going to be stretches like this. And it's now a fortunate thing the Royals were so good back in April and May that they've allowed themselves to have a little bit of this cushion. And even before this series, they'd had one of the best records in the second half. And I get that the White Sox were 2 of those series, but treading water is a theme that I've had this year of, you don't bottom out. You don't get swept back-to-back series or lose 7 in a row or 8 in a row. You're going to be right there when it's all said and done. But as I said, and what I will say about this segment, it's hard to have this positive approach, this optimistic approach after nights like tonight, because there's nothing positive about what happened at Target Field in Game 2. The only good thing I can say is that tomorrow there's going to be a game, and Cole Ragans will be pitching that game. Okay, we're going to take our final break of the show, but before we do that, thank you for making Locked On Royals your first listen today. For your second listen, enjoy the Locked On MLB podcast. Host Pat Sullivan, a.k.a. Sully, is here daily to provide a national expertise with his trademark humor to help you get ready for the MLB playoffs here in the dog days of summer. Prepare for the Fall Classic with Sully, who has it all covered every single day on Locked On MLB. Available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. When we come back, am I concerned about the inning workload for Seth Lugo and for Cole Ragans? That's coming up on Locked On Royals. You are tuning to Locked On Royals in the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson. You can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. Want to give a shout out to our final sponsor in SupplyHouse. Get supplies from the site that's made for the skilled trades at SupplyHouse.com. SupplyHouse.com is the reliable way to order plumbing, HVAC, and electrical products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Shop a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from over 400 top brands and get your order delivered right to your door with fast shipping from coast to coast. Need help with an order? Get expert support and industry-leading service from the friendliest folks in the business and talk to a real person every time. Pros in the skilled trades can get a competitive edge by joining SupplyHouse.com's free Trade Master program. Every Trade Master gets access to a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. Join the thousands of trade pros already benefiting from their free membership at SupplyHouse.com and order plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies from anywhere with just a few clicks at SupplyHouse.com. I think a theme of tonight's game has to involve Seth Lugo. And I think for tomorrow's preview, it does have to involve Cole Ragans, because those are the 2 workhorses, right, in your rotation. Seth Lugo, even with the implosion tonight, he's a front 2 guy. We're not feeling any less confident in Seth Lugo's abilities. We all know that he's still a good pitcher, but he's not had a great second half. And I do think when it came down to it, this was something to be expected, right? Seth Lugo was not going to be a 20-game winner with a 2.05 ERA and win the Cy Young. Not with the lack of strikeouts, not with some of the underlying data that he had. He wasn't Tarek Skubal, right? He's not even Corbin Burns. He's a really good pitcher, and he is experiencing a career year. But part of me also was concerned right before the All-Star break that maybe Seth Lugo was going to run out of gas, because it is one thing to go from, 160 innings, 170 innings as your career high, and then you throw 180, right? I remember in Brady Singer's great 2022, they shut him down at the very end because he hadn't thrown that many innings at the big league level, and you didn't want to run him into the ground. I think Chris Bubich had the same thing in 2021, if I'm not mistaken. So you had scenarios like that where those guys hadn't done it before. You don't want them to completely run their arm into the ground and have a bad finish to the season. Those years were different because the Royals weren't playing for anything. Seth Lugo and Cole Ragans have to be there in the end. They have to continue throwing 5, 6, 7 innings every time they take the ball. But there is going to be those starts, one's against Minnesota, one's against Houston, Cleveland, the Yankees, the Phillies, where you go, which version are we getting tonight? Seth Lugo, for his first 15 to 20 starts, it was obvious what he was going to do. Quality start. You could just book it. Now I am approaching it a little bit more cautiously because he hasn't been that great in his last 5 to 6 starts. His ERA is not very good. He's not striking out a lot of guys. And tonight he was as bad as he's looked in a Royals uniform. And I think that concern comes from he's not pacing to just throw 20 more innings, right? He surpassed his career high in innings right after the second half began. And he still had 9 to 10 to 11 starts to go. I mean, we're talking about a guy that's going to shatter his innings record by 50 or 60. He's going to get north of 180, hopefully, if he stays healthy the entire season. Cole Ragans shattered his career high in innings in the first half. So now he's a guy that you go, all right, well, he was great through the first 10, 11, 12 starts. Now what's he going to look like in the back half, right? There's been concern about his velocity and stuff like that. And the Royals, let me be clear about this. The Royals understand that. J.J. Picollo said that, which is why they acquired Michael Lorenzen. They've had those internal discussions about the workload, and that's why they got an extra starter. And it wouldn't surprise me in September, if Lugo goes out against the Angels next week and gets shelled, of maybe we go to a 6-man rotation just to give that extra day of rest. What I will say is I'm not concerned until the Royals are concerned and go to that 6-man rotation. Because I know the goal, of course, is to get into the postseason. But part of me in the back of my mind is going, if they get there and they draw the Astros or they draw the Yankees, whatever the case would be, if they have Lugo and Ragans on fumes at that point, how likely are your chances of winning? And maybe you're going in there like I am and saying, hey, even if they lose the series, I'm not considering it to be a disappointment. And I don't think when you digest this season a month or two after it's over, you'll look back and say that was a disappointment. I think even right now, you consider it a massive success. But these are also things the Royals are going to be evaluating because they're not looking at, if they get in the postseason, our job's done. They're going to try to advance. They're going to try to be as hot as they've been all season long. But I have a hard time seeing that if their starters, their front two, are on fumes. I mean, I do not think that it is a coincidence that Michael Wacha missed time with that fractured foot and has just been nails now for 10 or 11 starts. Now, I know he was great before the injury, missed some time, and then came back and was even stronger. It's because he had that midseason rest. Right, Cole Ragans and Seth Lugo have been towing the slab every 5th day. And no, I don't want them to miss a start. They're going to need to make starts because they're the best the Royals have to offer. But they're going to need to lean on Michael Wacha and Michael Lorenzen and even Brady Singer to get them through this gauntlet. Because Lugo and Ragans can't be, Batman and Robin anymore. They can't be, two Supermen anymore. They can't be the 7 shutout innings guy. They need help. And I think they have been getting help from Singer and from Wacha and from Lorenzen, and even though it's been 2 starts. I think that the bullpen can give them some relief. But it is something that we're going to have to gauge and take seriously the rest of the way. And the Royals likely already are. They're already looking at that inning workload and going, okay, Seth Lugo just gave up 7 earned runs. If Cole Ragans goes out tomorrow and has a bad outing, you got to keep a closer eye on what they look like the next time around. If it's another bad outing, maybe you do have to call Alec Marsh back up and go to a 6-man rotation just to give some extra rest for the final 40 games. But tomorrow, if Cole Ragans goes out there and shoves, maybe Cole Ragans just feeling better and Seth Lugo is just in a bit of a rut right now. And he'll have a chance to bounce back against a bad Angels team next week at Kauffman Stadium. Well, that's going to do it for another edition of Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I've been your host, Jack Johnson. If you want to follow me on Twitter, you can do so at JohnnyJ_15 and find us on wherever you get your podcast, because here on the Locked On Podcast Network, it is your team every day. But thank you for making Locked On Royals your first listen today. Now go check out the Locked On MLB podcast. Prepare for the Fall Classic with Sully, who has it all covered every single day. You can find the link to Locked On MLB in the description, so you don't need to search. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Tomorrow, we're going to recap this start by Cole Ragans in the same way we recapped both Brady Singer and Seth Lugo's start. Maybe look ahead to Cincinnati and take a pulse, maybe from some of the comments on this video or from Twitter about where the fan base is at, and maybe a deeper dive into this wild card race. But until then, you take it easy, Kansas City.